Blog Talk Radio.
Michamo apura kanu apura kaitnut neye AMANSEM da medinde ujirafo kwesi rane pata akan akwamumai maruka etipi mu ujiraman mu. Greetings to all apura kani apura kaitnut people, meaning Africans, black people. Today is AMANSEM Day, Affairs of the Nation Day. My name is Ojirafo Kwesi Rane Pata Akan. Ojirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America within Ojiraman, the purified nation, Afurakani, Afurakaini people in the Western Hemisphere. Let us say we thank you once again for tuning into the broadcast. We're opening up the chat room. If you have any questions or comments and you'd like to interact in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, simply hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. For those who are new to the broadcast, we have 4 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have Akanfo Nanasom, Ancient Authentic Akan Ancestral Religion on Joda on Monday nights, where we deal specifically with the Akan expression of Nanasom ancestral religion, first and foremost because we are Akan. Secondly, because of the misinformation being propagated regarding Akan ancestral religion, culture, cosmology, ritual practice, and so forth from individuals not only in the Western Hemisphere, but from those individuals on the continent who have been infected with white pseudo-religion such as Christianity, Islam, Judaism, various expressions of white perverse culture and so forth. Those perversions have infected their presentation of Akan ancestral religion. So we deal with ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion going back to our ancestral origins. Akan people originating from ancient Kanat, which is a title of ancient Nubia. Some of our people migrated from Kanat after the fall of KAMIT and Kanat 2,000 years ago and migrated to the western part of the continent, reestablished the Kanat Empire, the Empire of Ghana, as it was later called. Hundreds of years later, because of Muslim invasion, some of our people migrated further south towards the Savannah and Forest Belt region and reestablished Akana civilization in those regions. Hundreds of years later, some of our people were forced into the Western Hemisphere from those regions into North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe during the Musuo Kessie, the Great Perversity, the Enslavement era, and this is how we ended up in the Western Hemisphere. However, we maintained our ancestral religious traditions. Thus, the Akan tradition is called Winti in South America and Suriname, from the Akan term Quinti. It is called Obia in Jamaica, from the Akan term Obai. The Akan ancestral religion is called Hoodoo in North America, from the Akan term Ndu, meaning medicine for roots, trees, plant life. It also means to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession, spirit communication, and so forth. And thus we've maintained these ancestral religious traditions. And of course, Hoodoo, Ndu also means medicine from roots, trees, plant life, and also to become heavy with the spirit in the language of ancient Kanit and Kamet, found in the Medutu, the so-called hieroglyphs and so forth. The same terms with the same meanings that we've been using for thousands of years all the way into North America. Because we were guided and empowered by our ancestresses and ancestors, the Nananom Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our direct blood circle, and the Abosom, the forces in nature assigned to us pre-incarnation and connected to us by blood. We were guided and empowered to wage war against the whites and their offspring, force the end of enslavement in the Western Hemisphere, that is through metal armaments as well as chemical and biological warfare, root work being the precedent established for that chemical and biological warfare in North America. So we deal with ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion on Joda Monday nights. On Abinada Tuesday nights, we have Ojida, which means purification. We deal with the purification of concepts, culture, ritual practice, cosmology, and so forth. We're talking about ancestral religion, ancestral religion, not just the Akan expression on the OKRA broadcast, but wherever we exist in the world as Afro-Akani people, our manifestation of ancestral religion, whether it's on the continent or in the Western Hemisphere. We talk about how ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives. Ancestral religion, Afro-Akani, or African ancestral religion, no matter what form it takes, which we call NANASOM, in essence, is defined as the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to incorporate law into our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions. So the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance, these are the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion. We state that OKRA operationalizes NANASOM. OKRA meaning purification, operationalizes our practice of ritually incorporating law and ritually restoring balance. Our ancestral culture, our way of life as Afro-Akani people, African black people, is to execute our divine function in creation as given to us by the Great Mother and the Great Father, Supreme Being. We seek to align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day as we're executing our function in life. The divine acceptance, the law, the love of order, and the divine rejection, the divine hatred of disorder and its purveyors, those are the expansive and contractive poles of culture, our way of life, our amamre. As we seek to align every thought, intention, and action every moment of every day with divine order, if we make legitimate mistakes, then we engage the ritual process, ritually incorporating divine law and ritually restoring divine balance. We engage that ritual process so that we can realign our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order and therefore get back on track after having made legitimate mistakes, but get back on track with executing our divine function in creation and aligning every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day. This is how ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives. So on that broadcast, we deal with the purification of cosmology, the understanding of culture, the nature of the deities, ancestral spirits, their relationship to us, and how it impacts every aspect of our lives. We also deal with this notion of ancestrally inherited culture, spirit genetically inherited culture, transcarnationally transmitted culture. We are born with our ancestral religious practices. We are assigned to Abosom, Orisha, Vodou, deities, forces in creation. They are assigned to our spirits by the Supreme Being pre-incarnation. And therefore, when our spirits are sent into the womb of the woman who will become our mother, we carry the energy of the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou with us into creation. We carry this energetic complex of the patriclan and matriclans of which we are a component part into creation. So we have ancestresses and ancestors of our direct blood circles who have been with us for thousands of years, who are connected to us when we are born into the world. We have the forces in nature, the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, specific forces in nature that are assigned to us pre-incarnation by the Supreme Being. We carry them into the world. So we are born with ancestral religion. It is not given to us. We inherit that spirit genetically and transcarnationally through successive reincarnations. And of course, this is for Afro-Akani, African black people only. The whites and their offspring, the spirits of disorder, have no capacity to communicate with or be possessed by the forces in nature, because the whites and their offspring are spirits of disorder by nature. They incarnate as spirits of disorder. They are the cancerous cells in the body of black humanity, and just as cancerous cells within your body are isolated, destroyed, and expelled from the body by the immune system, the whites and their offspring are no different. So we're talking about Afro-Akani people being born into the world already carrying our ancestral religious practices, which are inborn, innate, intrinsic within us. So this is what we deal with on that broadcast, the OKRA broadcast. On Wednesday night, Awukuda, Akuada. We have Egua, Marketplace. We showcase Apurakani businesses, organizations, and institutions, those who are supporting and positively impacting the Apurakani community, those who maintain their ancestral religious values in the context of their service to the community, and because those ancestral religious values inform their service to the community, they're doing that kind of great work in the community. So we showcase businesses, organizations, and institutions. We also deal with the philosophical foundation of economic development rooted in our ancestral religious values. We have published our OKRAA economic development model, which is an approach to economic development, once again rooted in our ancestral religious values. This is a holistic approach to economic development for Apurakani people. And the OKRAA economic development model, you can download that free publication from our website, just as you can download our 29 books. The ebook versions are all free downloads from the website as well. Tonight is Yauda, which is Thursday, also called Yada and Abada Thursday. We have AMANSEM, Affairs of the Nation. We're talking about our approach to our specific issues that confront us as an Oman, as a nation, but specifically as Ojira Mine, the purified Ojira Oman nation. Mine also means west, land of the setting sun, in the language of ancient KAMIT and KAMET, as well as the Akan language. So our designation, Ojira Mine, means the purified nation, Apurakani people in the Western Hemisphere, the land of the setting sun, the West. Ojira Mine, the purified nation, because we were forced into this Western Hemisphere. Of course, we connect with one another in the Western Hemisphere, but at some point we're directed by our ancestresses and ancestors to coalesce in a specific region of the Earth Mother's body. In this region of the Western Hemisphere, we blend ancestral blood circles in this region to bring ancestresses and ancestors back into the community to be reborn and so forth. We interface with the plant life, animal life, and mineral life in this region of the Earth Mother's body, which for us, when we migrated, we were forced to migrate here. We came in contact with new plant life, animal life, and mineral life we had not come in contact with before, so we interface with them for food as well as medicine, interface with the spirits of plant life, animal life, and mineral life through ritual practice, plant totems, animal totems, mineral totems, and so forth. We also interface with the unique expression of the Earth Mother divinities, Asase-Afo and Asase-Ya, in this region of their body. We interface with the unique expression of the Abosom, which is the Akan term for deities, the Orisha, the Yoruba term for the same deities, Vodou, the Ebe-Enfon term for the same deities, the Ntoro, misnomer Ntoro, the ancient Akanit and Kameti term for deities, the same forces in creation. And of course, we use that term Ntoro in Akan for the same thing as well. We interface with the unique expression of the forces in nature as they manifest in this region of the Earth Mother's body, in the mountainous regions, the riverine areas, the savanna regions, and so forth, the warm areas, the cold areas, the ocean areas that are connected to the ocean and so forth, the mountainous regions, hill regions, and so forth, the unique expression of the Abosom and their energy complexes as they manifest in this region of the Earth Mother's body. So this blending of ancestral blood circles in a unique region of the Earth Mother's body, the plant life, animal life, and mineral life that we've taken in for food as well as medicine, all of these events in confluence affect us. They forge within us a locative identity. So when we bring ancestresses and ancestors back through these blended blood circles in this region, we have forged a locative identity, a unique expression of Apurakani culture born of that locative identity. We thus have a unique approach to dealing with our issues, a unique approach to ancestral religious practice, such as the Hoodoo tradition, which is the Akan tradition in North America, the Juju tradition, which is the Yoruba tradition in North America, the Voodoo tradition, which is Ebe-Enfon, the Wanga tradition, which is the Ovambo tradition in North America, the Ngangain tradition, which is the Fang tradition in North America, the Grigri tradition, which is the Mende tradition in North America. The manner in which we approach ancestral religion is born of our locative identity, blending ancestral blood circles and interfacing in this region of the Earth Mother's body and the unique expression of the divine energy of the Abosom Orisha Vodou in this region. So our approach to solving our issues is unique. Our approach to dealing with issues confronting us as an Oman, as a nation, is specific and properly defined. We understand what an Oman, a nation is. An Oman, a nation, is a living, breathing entity governed by specific Abosom Orisha Vodou energy complexes. Similar to an organ within your body, it's a living, breathing entity governed by specific energy complexes, specific Abosom. And the cells are children of the organ, and they interface with one another harmoniously, but they also support the larger organ, the entity of which they are a component part. We recognize an Oman as a living, breathing entity formed and fashioned by the Abosom, the forces in nature. We're drawn to coalesce as an Oman, that living, breathing entity, that greater entity of which we are a component part, and the Abosom that govern that entity. When we live in harmony with that, then we're operating in a harmonious way as an Oman, as a nation. We have an Amaniye approach, a nationist approach to dealing with our issues. We talk about Amaniye nationism, the purification of nationalism, a proper understanding of what nation building is, rooted in the proper knowledge of what an Oman, a nation, really is, and the Abosom, the forces of nature that govern that collective of Afro-Akani people. So, tonight's broadcast, of course, we're dealing with a nationist approach, an Amaniye approach to one of these issues that confronts our people, rooting out sexual predation in the conscious community. Now, we call this Ka Skai Part 4. If you're going to deal with the conscious community, you must have a proper understanding of what the term conscious means. So we did a 3-part series properly defining the term conscious, showing its etymological roots and cosmological roots. It is not rooted in European languages. It comes directly from the language of ancient Kemet and the cosmology of ancient Kemet. So we went into detail about that, talking about Ka Skai, the origin of the term conscious, and also the relationship to the god, the Ntoro Hetep, and the Ntorot, the goddess Hetepet. If you don't know who Hetep is, and Hetepet is these male and female forces, divine forces in creation, then you don't know what consciousness is. So these ignorant Negroes running around talking about Hotep this and Hotep the nigger and Hotep dusty Hotepers and Hotep battles and all this nonsense. And you have coons like writers at theroot.com and thegrio.com and other black websites, or coon Negroes on quote-unquote black Twitter, or idiots on social media and so forth, misusing the term Hetep because they're too ignorant to do any kind of research. We don't entertain these fools. They're no different than people strung out on heroin or crack or some other drug, because white culture is that white substance that gets in your system and causes you to think and act in a self-destructive, maladaptive fashion until you make the decision that you want to clean yourself up and purge that white poison, that pollution out of your system. And until someone makes the decision that they want to purge that white perverse culture or thinking or way of life out of their spirit body, their adjuni, their minds, then they will continue to spout out stupidity. And we don't entertain these fools, no matter where they manifest. So we give proper definitions. In that 3-part series, the first 3 parts, we went into some detail in the text talking about Ka Skai. And just to summarize that, of course, when you look at the etymology of the term conscious as well as conscience, the roots will be shown to be kan and then skire. And kan means together as well as to come together, whether it's ko or kan, that root, together or to come together. And then shus comes and science or science, conscience, science or conscience. The root is the quote-unquote Latin skire, but it comes from sky, which means to separate, divide, or split. And the whites and their offspring will say, well, to skire is to separate, divide, and split. And when you dissect things and separate them out, then you can study them. So conscience or conscious While con-scire and chus is the root of science as well. They're saying it's separating and dividing and splitting so you can examine something. That's all they can come up with regard to what con-scire or con-scius and con-chus in English means. But we show the etymological origin of these terms. Con, there's a reason why con, as well as ka, ko, and later com and con and ka in the Indo-European languages and their expressions means together, like co meaning a co-occurring disorder, for example, or co-equal or co-ed and so forth, meaning together. Con or come meaning to come together, to pull together, to draw together, and so forth. Why does the term, or the sound vibrations, the collection of sound vibrations, ka or kan means to come together, to pull together, and so forth. When you look at the term in ancient KAMIT, the term ka, it means that which is draws together. The symbol itself is the word for soul, divine consciousness, literally. So the soul itself is called ka, male, kat, or kayat, female. The actual medut, or symbol, are two arms and hands reaching up to grab and pull something together. That's why ka, those sound vibrations, mean to pull together or coming together. The whites and their offspring, writing in their dictionaries, would say ka means together or to pull something together, bring something together. If you ask them, well, why does the sound ka mean to pull something together or bring something together? Why doesn't bu mean to pull something together? Why does it have to be ka? They can't tell you that because they didn't originate the term. They can't tell you that because all they know is they learned that term and those sound vibrations, ka, meaning together or pull something together. So that's the definition, but they have no basis. We have the same term, ka, but we also have the symbolism with the two arms and hands reaching up to grab and pull something together, and then the cosmology that gives birth to the terms. Ka means soul, male, kat, female, as well as kayat. That is a deity that dwells in the head region of the Afurai male, Afurai female. It is a divinity. Before you enter into your mother's womb, as an ancestral spirit in the ancestral realm, before you're drawn into the mother's womb to be born as a child, conceived and later born as a child, before we enter into the physical world once again through Debra or reincarnation, we are drawn to Inyamewa, Amenet, Amen, Mawu and Lisa, the great mother and great father, supreme being. They assign a specific deity to dwell with us throughout the course of our lives and guide and empower us throughout the course of our lives. They direct that divinity to take up residence in our head region of our spirit body. So just like your physical body has a smaller physical body in the head region that regulates all functions in the physical body, which is your brain, your spirit body, which we call Sum Sum in the Akan tradition, Sahu and Ancient Kemet, the spirit body has a smaller spiritual organ, a force, a divinity that takes up residence in the head region of the spirit body that regulates order and guides all functions within the spirit body throughout the course of your life. That force is the Ka, or Kat. Ka for male, Kat for female. And that deity takes up residence in the head region. Now you're a spirit with a soul, and then you're sent back into the ancestral realm, and then eventually you're drawn into your mother's womb, and then 40 weeks later you're born into the world. That force in the head region is always pulling you towards thoughts, intentions, and actions that are in harmony with divine order, and repelling you from thoughts, intentions, and actions and entities that will place you out of harmony with divine order. You experience that pull in the head region. Sometimes people will call it the first mind, but that's not really what it is. There's a divinity. Now, of course, sometimes people can be guided by ancestral spirits or discarnate spirits of non-relatives who are trying to pull them in different directions. But when you engage in ritual practice, you can delineate the difference between the pull of the Ka, that deity dwelling in the head region, or the influence of an ancestral spirit or a non-related spirit. Because when you engage ritual practice, the pull is no longer just an influence or a push or a drag or a pull. You begin to communicate with that deity just like you can communicate with a human being. So you can communicate with that male divinity, and he will show himself to you if you're a male. You can communicate with that female divinity. She will show herself to you as a female, course only. That deity is called Ka, as well as Ka in ancient Kemet is called the Ori Inu in the Yoruba tradition, the inner spiritual head. It is called the Se Lido in Vodun. It is called the OKRA and OKRAA, male and female. In the Akan language, it's called the Chi. In Igbo, every culture recognizes there's a deity. Every Afro-Akani culture recognizes there's a deity assigned to dwell with the person throughout the course of their lives. And encoded within that divinity, that spirit's brain is the function you are to execute in creation. So it's constantly guiding you. The symbolism, and we show the symbolism on the page, the image for this broadcast, the promotional image for this broadcast. You see that we show the image of the brain. Inside the image of the brain, we show the two arms with the forearms reaching upward and the hands open, grasping. That is a symbol of the Ka in the Medutu. And what the Ka, the soul, is grasping is the Ba, or Ba, the divine living energy that dwells within us, that animates our physical and spirit bodies and so forth. So the union of the Ba and the Ka is the union of the spirit and the soul. And we've talked about the Ba and Ba in different broadcasts and publications as well. But the key is Ka is the divine consciousness. It's the divinity dwelling in the head region, wired within that spiritual force, that spiritual brain, the programs that you are to operate off of, what your divine function in creation is, how you are to operate, what you are to do, and so forth. And the symbol is the two arms reaching out to Ka, to grasp, to pull together, to draw together, and so forth. This is why Ka means, in Kan means to together and to pull together. In the quote-unquote European languages, they stole the term from us, but they didn't have the requisite cosmological understanding of what that force actually means. Then you have sky. Sky or Skyre in their languages comes from sky. In the ancient term, they would say Skyre means to separate or divide or to split. In our language, yes, it does mean that. Sky does mean to separate, to divide, or to split, but it's not just talking about separating out different ideas and examining them and so forth. That's the residual definition. The root sky means a plow, and the symbolism is that of a plow. And the plow splits or divides or separates. When you use a plow and split the earth, and then when you open the earth up, creating that split and overturning the soil and so forth, then you can take the seeds and plant the seeds in that split. And then the seeds can be embedded in the soil. And then they can germinate and root, and the roots can go down deep in the soil and grab the nutrients, and then you can eventually have sprouts and crops and so forth, and you can be nourished by them. So when you're talking about a plow, something that splits or divides, it separates, creates a division. And when we talk about creating a division, a separation, that also has to do with the ritual practice. In the Akan language, the word for prayer is mpai, bo. Pai means to split or to cleave. It's the same term in ancient Kemet, pai meaning to split or to cleave. That means creating an incision, a split within the spirit realm so you can enter that incision and enter into the spirit realm. Ritual prayer, the sound vibrations that you release, those sound vibrations provoke a response. It creates an incision or a split, a gateway so you can enter the spirit realm, communicate with the ancestresses and ancestors, the deities and so forth, be informed and empowered by them, and then come back to yourself and execute your function in creation or learn what you need to learn from them, whether it's learning healing modalities or what herbs to pick so you can heal somebody of an illness or what you need to do or what's coming around the corner or somebody trying to come and harm you. Getting foreknowledge of that, you create that split or incision through ritual practice. And once you make that split or incision, you can enter that gateway you just created to draw nourishment, wisdom, guidance, experience from the Abosom, the Nsamanfo, the deities and ancestral spirits, and then come back and utilize what you received and harmonize your thoughts, intentions, and actions and the circumstances of your life. The same is true on the mundane level when we create the split with the sky, with the plow, opening up the earth so we can plant those seeds so they can go down deep in the soil and grab those nutrients so they can pull them out and so we can be fed by them and nourished by them and empowered by them and strengthened by them and so forth. But there's another key with regard to that. So that's that Ka and Skai. You're using your consciousness, the Ka, the soul, the divine consciousness, to create a split, a sky, a rending, a separation, so you can go in deep and get the knowledge and information and wisdom you need to get to empower yourself and repair that which needs to be repaired. But then we go into the text of ancient Kemet because this is directly related to the god Hetep and the goddess Hetepet. So when we go into the text of Kemet, and we talked about this in the parts 1, 2, and 3, but there's another section that we want to talk about tonight that's directly related to this notion of how we are to conduct ourselves with regard to divine balance and equilibrium with regard to Afurakani, male and female relationships. So when we go to section chapter 110 in the Ntrt the so-called Book of the Dead, misnomered Book of the Dead, but the Ntrt the Book of Coming Forth by Day and so forth. There's a specific chapter. We're not going to go through the entire chapter because it's a very long chapter, so we don't have to go through the entire piece. There are certain points that we want to talk about. So, chapter 110, title of it says, "Here begin the chapters of the Sekhet Hetepet," which is the divine fields of peace and offerings and so forth, and the chapters of coming forth by day, of going into and of coming out from the underworld, of coming to Sekhet Aru, of being in Sekhet Hetepet, the fields of peace and so forth, the mighty city, the Lady of Winds, of having power there, of becoming an Aku, an illumined ancestor or ancestress there, of plowing there, of reaping there, of eating there, of drinking there, of making love there, and of doing everything even as a man does upon earth. So we go into the divine fields of peace, the Sekhet Hetep, the portion of the ancestral realm where we operate in balance. When someone makes their transition, you make your transition, the spirit separates from the body. If you lived in harmony with order, after spending some time, a number of days with the living family, and the funerary process goes through and people eventually have a funerary service and so forth, and the burial takes place, and the spirit of the deceased individual communicates with the living family members, but at some point they begin to make that transition or that journey to the realm, that aspect of the ancestral realm where the other ancestresses and ancestors are, where they are seated and they live in the community of the ancestresses and ancestors in that community, just like we live here in this community. And then periodically they will return to earth through spirit possession, spirit communication, through dreams, through rituals and so forth, to check up on the earthly family or give some guidance or some direction and so forth, but they spend most of their time interfacing with the ancestresses and ancestors in that realm of the Sekhet Hetep, the divine field of peace, balance, equilibrium. Of course, if people were not living in harmony with divine order throughout the course of their lives, they are repelled from that region of the ancestral realm and they become earthbound spirits who are transient and homeless, hanging around the place where they died, harassing people and so forth, that kind of thing in a negative existence. But here we're talking about the average person who does make their transition and they go to the ancestral realm, the Sekhet Hetep, after going through that judgment of the balancing of the heart against the feather in the dual hall of Ma'at, the Usek Ma'ati, and then after that, going through the judgment and interrogation with the Ntoro, the god Ma'ah, which we've talked about in a series on the god Ma'ah. And once you pass the test with regard to Ma'at and pass the test with regard to the god Ma'ah, then you can be admitted into the Sekhet Hetep. So this chapter is talking about, here begins the chapters of the Sekhet Hetep, going in and coming out, but not only becoming an ancestral spirit who's illumined there, an honorable ancestral spirit, plowing there, reaping there, eating there, drinking there, making love there, and this is what we're talking about tonight. So when you see the vignette or the images for that, you'll see the deceased individual having a plow in his hand. He's engaged or she's engaged, either male or female, engaged in the sky process, using the plow, the sky, to split sky or plow the field to make that incision so that seeds can be buried and so that the person can become an Aku, an illumined ancestor or ancestress. They're plowing the divine fields of Sekhet Hetep. And when you plow the divine fields of Sekhet Hetep, the reason why those fields are vibrant and fertile and so forth, because the divine living energy of Ra and Ra is the creator and creatress. When you see Ra in his divine solar boat sailing across the sky for the 12 hours of the day, and then sets in the west and goes in the boat, night boat, and sails in the underworld for the 12 hours of the night, bringing that divine living energy into the underworld, the spirit realm, getting to the Sekhet Hetep and flooding that region with that divine living energy. So the fields in the Sekhet Hetep are fully vibrant and carrying and holding the energy of Ra and Ra as the creator and creatress. So when you plow with that sacred sky, that splitter, that divider and so forth, and plow in the sacred fields of Sekhet Hetep, then you unleash the divine living energy of Ra and Ra, that creative, fertile, powerful energy of the creator and creatress. So you're plowing in the field of Sekhet Hetep. But here's what the text says, portions of the text. So we're going to go down. We don't have to go through the little introductory part, but they're talking about the boat. He's talking about the boat that he was in, the sacred boat that he was in. Behold me now, for I make this mighty boat to travel over the lake of Hetep. And I brought it away with might from the palace of Shu. The domain of his stars groweth young and renews in former strength. I have brought the boat into the lakes thereof, so that I may come forth in the cities thereof, and I have sailed into their divine city, Hetep. And behold, it is because I am at peace with his seasons and with his guidance and with his territory and with the company of the deities who are his firstborn. So first, going back to that portion, he's in the sacred boat and he's sailing and he's entering into the divine fields of peace in the sacred city of Hetep. He's making it to the ancestral realm. He's not going to be an earthbound spirit caught up. He's making it to the ancestral realm. And the reason he's making it to the ancestral realm, of course, he lived a harmonious life in the physical world. He said, and behold, it is because I am at peace, in balance with his seasons, in the field of Hetep, and with his guidance, and with his territory, and with the company of the gods, the goddesses who are his firstborn. If you're at peace or equilibrium with the divinity Hetep, when you look at the term Hetep, it's a plate, it's an offering plate with the offering food on the top and so forth, and it represents balance and equilibrium. And when we talk about Hetep, we're talking about balance, equilibrium. When the sun sets in the west and the sun is touching the western mountain range, that is the manifestation of the Hetep symbol. The mountain range is there, and then the sun is like that food that's setting on top of that plate. So when you see the symbol of Hetep in the Medutu, and it looks like a flat plate with a loaf on top, a bread loaf on top in the middle, balanced in the middle, that's what you're looking at, the original manifestation. That is the sun disk, which is that quote-unquote loaf or that sacred food sitting upon the mountain range in the west. And this is why you see the great mother Nut bent over at the sky. The stars are in her belly. Her womb is in the area of the sunrise. So they say she gives birth to the sun in the morning. And then her nose and mouth, because she's bent over from sunrise to sunset, she's bent over the canopy of the sky, and the stars are in her body. They say she swallows or breathes in the sun at night, and then she gives birth to the sun in the morning. So when she's, quote-unquote, swallowing the sun at night and it goes into the underworld and so forth, that's the swallowing of that divine food, that circular disc and so forth, that sat upon the western mountain range, manifesting the symbol of Hetep. And the sun sitting in on the western mountain range is showing balance, equipoise, equilibrium. And in order to get into the field of Hetep, we must be balanced. That means emotional balance. That means not being controlled by lust. Not only lust, but not controlled by malice either. But not being controlled by lust. You can't be controlled by lust and maintain equilibrium. You can't be a sexual predator and maintain equilibrium, or make rationalizations for maintaining equilibrium. You can't get to the ancestral realm in the after-death state, but this is not only talking about the after-death state, it's talking about the ritual state in the spirit realm throughout the course of your life, throughout all of your life. Yes, we enter the ancestral realm after death and remain there for 100 or more years until we're reborn, but throughout the course of your life, you also enter into the ancestral realm of the spirit realm, not only when you're sleeping for 1/3 of your life, 8 hours a day or a night and so forth, you're in the ancestral realm to a certain extent during that 8 hours, at certain points during that 8 hours, but anytime you engage the ritual process, you stop focusing on the physical world and your spirit enters into the spirit realm. So you're entering into the spirit realm and making forays into the spirit realm throughout the course of your life. And when you're even when you're meditating or thinking, contemplating in a focused manner and so forth, you've withdrawn your consciousness, physical realm, to the spirit realm, and you can be informed and guided by the ancestral spirits and the deities, as well as the deity that governs your head. Every time you're tuned to the force in nature that governs your head and you follow that guidance, you just entered into the spirit realm. So we're constantly entering into the spirit realm. So these texts are not just talking about what happens after death. We talked about what we're going throughout the course of our lives. If you're trying to make it to the ancestral realm and remain there in a state of balance in the second Hetep, the fields of peace, you must manifest peace or equilibrium or balance in your thoughts, intentions, and actions. If you're seeking to have a balanced life and have a Sekhet Hetep or a balanced field of peace throughout the course of your life so you can operate in a harmonious fashion, then you must balance your thoughts, intentions, and actions and manifest that Hetep throughout the course of your life as an adult. If you do not, you're going to create disorder, imbalance, disequilibrium, and so forth, and that causes problems only for you, but those who are connected to you. So when we're reading these texts, and he talks about being in the boat and sailing over into the city of Hetep, the divine city of Hetep. Now he's moving to a state of equilibrium or balance. He says, and behold, it is because I am at peace with his seasons. And that means a couple of things. At peace with his seasons, the seasons of Hetep, and guidance, and with his territory, and with the company of the deities who are his firstborn. The deities are the forces in nature that regulate order in creation. If you step outside of that order, then you create disorder and you're slated for punishment or eradication. If the cells in your body step outside of the order that regulates the body, they become cancerous. If they're not reparable, then they're destroyed, they're killed, expelled from the body so that the maintenance of the body continues. When they talk about the seasons, at peace, equilibrium with the seasons, it's not only talking about cycles within a particular year, but it's also talking about cycles and seasons and growth and development of maturity of a male and the female. So if we go a little bit further, then we get to the source of what we're talking about tonight. In the field of Hetep, he's talking about the divinities who are Heru and Set, and talking about the balance of Heru and Set and them becoming balanced once again. Let me gain dominion within that field. Talking about the field of Sekhet Hetep. For I know it, and I have sailed among its lakes so that I might come into its cities. My mouth is strong, meaning my divine speech is strong, and I am equipped. Let me be rewarded with your fields, O God Hetep. That which is your wish is that which I will do, O Master of the winds. May I become an Aku therein, meaning an ancestral spirit who's venerated, illuminated, full of wisdom. May I eat therein, may I drink therein, may I plow therein, may I reap therein, may I contend therein, may I make love therein, may my words be mighty therein, may I be in authority therein. When you plow properly, make that incision, and then you bury the seeds, and then they germinate and root and so forth and eventually sprout and fully flower. If you're properly plowing, then you'll have abundance. You'll have the full flowering of crops and so forth. So you can plow therein. And if you plow properly because you're following your Ka, your divine consciousness, and you're in the field of Hetep, so you're following your consciousness, and you're operating in a balanced fashion in the manner of equilibrium, regulating and balancing your thoughts, intentions, and actions, including your emotional state and so forth. You're properly plowing. He said, may I plow therein. Then he said, may I reap therein. Once he can reap therein, then he says, may I eat therein, may I drink therein. He properly plowed because he followed his Ka, his divine consciousness. He reaped therein because he had the abundance of crops. That's not only crops, but talking about plowing therein, going in the underworld, under the surface, connecting with the ancestresses and ancestors, connecting with the deities, connecting with the Ka and Kayat and so forth. When you connect with them, you reap the wisdom and the guidance and the energy that they present for you and provide for you and so forth. You reap that, and then may I eat therein, may I drink therein. That's not only eating and drinking from the crops that you put forward, but also from the wisdom that you received after you plowed or went to the underworld to make that incision so that you can get some nourishment of wisdom and direction. So once you plow properly, reap properly, then you can consume what you plowed and reaped and so forth. May I eat therein, may I drink therein. May I contend therein. Now you have that energy from eating and drinking physically, but you also have the energy, that wisdom that's manifest because you receive proper knowledge, proper direction, proper information by invoking the deities ritually, evoking the ancestresses and ancestors ritually through plowing and reaping, ritual prayer, ritual song, ritual dance, creating these incisions into the spirit realm so you can enter, you can plow, reap, and so forth, and you can grab that information, that direction, that dispensation of energy. You can consume it. You can replenish your own energy by consuming what they've given you. You can be guided properly by consuming the knowledge and wisdom and guidance they've given you. So you reaped, but then you've eaten and you've drunk therein. Then you contend therein. It says, may I fight therein, may I contend therein. That means anything that comes in your way, any kind of information or influences or negative influences or pulls or drags, trying to drag you towards disorder, self-destructive behavior and so forth, because you plowed properly, because you reaped properly, now that you've consumed what you plowed and reaped for, you've consumed it through eating and drinking, or you consumed that wisdom and that energy and that replenishment of energy and so forth, now you have the power to fight or contend therein. In the field of Hetep, meaning you can repel any negative suggestions, anybody trying to drag you into self-destructive behavior, anybody trying to drag you into foolish self-destructive thoughts, rationalizations that will lead you to engage in behavior that's self-destructive, trying to make excuses for stupidity and so forth. You can repel all of that. You have that radiant energy to destroy all that. You're not controlled by anybody else, any negative entity at all, any negative person, because you plowed, reaped, and consumed. Now you can contend. And because you can contend, then the next piece says, may I make love therein, or may I copulate therein. not only copulating in the ancestral realm and so forth, but you copulate therein, meaning therein where? In the field of Hetep, the god Hetep as well as the goddess Hetepet. That means the god of divine peace, equilibrium. That means the goddess of peace and equilibrium, because peace or balance is a manifestation of equilibrated energy, balanced energy, complementary opposites that are balanced, just like a seesaw being balanced and so forth. So you're copulating therein, meaning you're connecting with the complementary opposite. And of course, only the Afurakani man, African black man, complements the Afurakaini woman, African black woman. Only the Afurakaini woman complements the Afurakani man. There's no dissexuality or homosexuality. That's insane. There's no interracialism. That is insane, self-destructive, and has never been supported by the deity. The whites and their offspring, including white Americans, white Europeans, white Asians, white Hindus, white Arabs, white pseudo-Native Americans, white Hispanics, white Latinos, and so forth. These are spirits of disorder who incarnate without a Ka or Ka'et. It is impossible physically or spiritually for them to balance us out because they are spirits of disorder without exception. All of them who exist, all of them who have ever existed, all of them who ever will exist until they become extinct, until we make them extinct, will incarnate as spirits of disorder. So when it talks about copulating therein, that means uniting with the male or female who is your complementary opposite, your balance, in the field of the test, in the field of equilibrium, in the field of manifest balance. Now, and it says, may I copulate within, and may my words be mighty therein. May I never be in a state of servitude therein. May I be in authority therein. You can't be in a state of servitude if you're in the fields of the Hetep and you've reaped and you've eaten and consumed that wisdom and direction and dispensation of energy from the deities, the forces in nature that regulate order. You contend with any negative projections from discarnate spirits or other individuals who try to drag you into self-destructive behavior. You can contend with them and overcome that. You can repel them. Now you can unite with your balance, your equilibrated balance, your complementary opposite in fusion and order and so forth. And you won't be in a state of servitude. He said, may my words be mighty therein. May I never be in a state of servitude therein. May I be in authority therein. You won't be in a state of servitude after you've connected with your balance, the one who's your balance, so you can copulate in the field of Hetep, in the field of equilibrium, in the field of balance, in the field of peace. When you connect with your balance, you can't be in a state of servitude. Your words will be mighty. You'll never be in a state of servitude. May I be in authority therein. You can be in authority. You can regulate your actions because you're not in a state of servitude, because you're not in a state of servitude because you're not following your lust. The only way you can be in a state of servitude with regard to copulation is if you're following lust, misguided desire, perverse desire. In this culture, and we're talking about here the philosophical foundation for consciousness, those who are conscious, or Ka Skai, utilizing their Ka, their soul, divine consciousness, the deity dwelling in the head region, to plow sky in the fields of Hetep and Hetepet so that they can sow and so they can reap and they can infuse that energy and consciousness and wisdom from the deities and ancestral spirits so they can empower themselves once they eat and drink of that power, that dispensation of power and guidance, divine guidance, and so they can copulate or connect with their mate, with their balance, one who balances them out, manifest equilibrium, and they're not in servitude. They actually exercise authority because they're not controlled by lust. This is the cosmological foundation for balanced relationships, not just in the spirit realm, but anytime you operate anywhere at any time in your life. You should be manifesting a state of equilibrium, balancing out your thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order, ascribing the values of divine order to every thought, every intention, and every action, every moment of every day. And if you fall out of balance legitimately, then you engage the ritual process, ancestral religion, to get yourself back on track. When you deal with the deity Hetep and the deity Hetepet, you're invoking divine equilibrium, or quote-unquote peace, or manifest peace, balance, equilibrium. You can't seek to connect with a female if you're a male who's not balancing you out. A female who's much younger than you is not balancing you out. So when we talk about sexual predation, it's not only talking about, on one hand, of course, is lust, criminality, some people just lusting and trying to engage in sexual activity out of balance, not seeking to align themselves with the person who's their balance. They're not invoking Het Heru. She's the one who draws us together in an ordered fusion, fusing together complementary opposites so that we can bring ancestral spirits back into the world through copulation and so forth in a balanced way, but also when we connect, we engage in a ritual process so we can align ourselves spiritually. We can overcome deficits, temporary deficits in our spirit energy and so forth when we're depleted, by connecting with our spouse in a harmonious fusion. Sexual activity through marriage, through a harmonious fusion, is no different than engaging in ritual song, ritual dance, ritual prayer, ritual meditation, and so forth. It's another gateway to the ancestral realm between those who are balanced out, who operate in the field of Hetep and Hetepet, in an equilibrium field and so forth, the field of peace, the field of divine balance and equilibrium. When you connect with the person who's your actual balance, then when you engage procreative activity or sexual activity with the person who's your balance, then you can tap into the tuning or the divine power of the forces in creation and replenish your own power properly. If you're lusting after someone who is not your balance, then you're not attuning to anything. You will draw in the kind of ancestral spirits that are just as self-destructive as you are, and you'll bring them back into the world, and you'll create some more disorder within the family, within the clan, within that generation, and maybe in the following generation as well. But when you connect with someone who is your balance, because you attune not only to Het Heru to be drawn together, but when you engage one another relationship-wise, you're seeking to move through the field of Hetep, the field of Hetepet, operating in equilibrium and balance and so forth. When you balance your thoughts, intentions, actions, emotions, and so forth, you regulate your relationship based on equilibrium. If there's some disorder or imbalance, you engage the ritual process to bring balance back to the relationship and so forth. You're invoking the deity Hetep, invoking the deity Hetepet and so forth. If you're not engaged in that, then you'll make excuses following the white culture and using that as a shield for you to operate in perversity, and you'll seek individuals who do not balance you out, not only through interracialism, but you have Negroes, perverts, who are trying to screw young girls and call just because they've turned 18, now they're, in their minds, okay, they're ready to have sex with them. So these criminal perverts use white culture as a shield to lust after and force themselves on young females. And that's sexual predation. And of course that manifests in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, the white pseudo-religions and so forth. They're rooted in sexual predation and perversity. The women in white culture have always been nothing more than machines used to produce children. And of course, dissexuality, homosexuality is the root of white culture. So that's what they prefer, but they only engage in quote-unquote traditional copulation so they can have children. But outside of that, they're always promoting dissexuality, homosexuality, all kinds of sexual deviance. But that includes, sexual deviance includes rape, it includes child molestation, it includes various forms of bestiality, but also sexual predation. People seeking out young females and making excuses. That's not consciousness. You're just a pervert. You're just a clown. You're just a criminal trying to call yourself conscious and cultural. but we make a distinction between these predators who try to call themselves conscious and cultural, really seeking just to engage in predatory behavior on young women in the culture. You become nothing more than an enemy who deserves to be executed. You're no longer part of the Afro-Akani community. You're no longer conscious or Ka Skai in the true sense. And once you're no longer that, as we talked about previously in our broadcast, talking about this ancient notion of throw them to the wolves or throw them to the dogs, we have certain individuals engaged in disordered behavior, criminality. That's when you repel your own Ka. Repel your own Ka, as the deity dwelling in your head region will separate from you. Now you're a spirit without a Ka, or Ka, a spirit without a soul, a spirit without an order inu. Now you're no different than the whites and their offspring. You may be black on the outside, but you're just as disfigured on the inside as they are. And therefore, you have become one of them. Therefore, whatever happens to you, whether you're executed by one of our people in the community or you're thrown to the enemy and the enemy executes you, it doesn't matter. It's applauded because you become the enemy, so we don't give a damn about you. So we have a number of predators or criminals pretending to be cultural, pretending to be conscious, pretending to be revolutionaries and so forth, but these are criminals. They are nothing more than sexual predators and need to be dealt with and discarded and eradicated as any sexual predator is. So that's reality. We have a cosmological foundation for how we operate in relationships. We understand the balance of male and female. We talked about in our previous broadcast, talking about the deity Sepa and the 42 gnomes of Sepatu, 42 nerves and 42 days in the Akan calendar and so forth. We talked about the quote-unquote 42 years it takes for someone to become what people believe to become a high priest, but it's really not talking about taking 42 years of initiation to become a high priest and so forth. It's talking about development. It's talking about the difference between stages of growth and development within the person. We talked about, for example, physically, a person, of course, reaches puberty around the 14th year and so forth, and they begin to grow and develop male and female characteristics with regard to sexual characteristics and so forth. Around the 21st year, the physical body is no longer growing and so forth, no longer getting taller. So the physical growth and development in that regard is complete, but then there's still growth and development going on. We talked about the brain continue to fully develop. It doesn't reach its full development until on average the 28th year. That's when the paring down or the pruning process with regard to the synapses completes itself, so the person's brain development is not fully complete until around the 28th year, and it depends on the person. Sometimes it's 27, sometimes it's 29, but on average around the 28th year. This is why in the Akan tradition we don't embrace or across the threshold of manhood and womanhood as far as adults is concerned until we reach that 28th year, and that 28th year is sacred because that's always the same date, the day you were born on, your Krada or your soul day, whatever day of the week you were born on. If it's a Monday, you're Kwajo or Ajua, or Tuesday, a Benada, and you're Kwabena or Abena. If you're born on that day of the week, and on your 28th birthday, it's always going to be that same day of the week. And it's a completion of a cycle. You just entered the threshold of manhood and womanhood once you cross that 28th year. But while the physical body is no longer getting taller, not only is the brain continuing to develop until around 28th year, but then you also have that notion of bone density. You don't reach your peak bone density until around, on average, close to the 29th year, 28th, 29th, 30th year. You don't reach that peak bone density, so the physical body is still developing. And the development of the skeletal and bone density is directly related consciousness and awareness. Now, the whites and their offspring never associated the skeleton, including the cranium and the skeletal system, with having to do with consciousness, but our people always have. When we talk about the god Amen, the deity of Saturday in our Akan tradition, the same Amen in ancient Kemet, the same Orisha Oko in Yoruba tradition, and Lazaka and Bodun and so forth, governing the skeletal system, but also governing the brain. Amen in Akan is that divinity, but the word for brain is also Amen. But the skeletal system is directly related to consciousness as well because of the marrow in the bones and so forth and the connection. You have bone marrow, stem cells, and these various different things directly related to brain functioning and so forth. So there's a direct relationship to that notion of peak bone density, fully developed, reaching around the late 20s. You're getting to peak bone density. Around the same time, your brain is finally fully maturing. We've always understand that, so we have deities who govern the skeletal system, who also govern the brain and also govern maturity. And you see that's why Amen is mummified and Menmenit, the form of Heteru, is shrouded as well. That means they've reached that status of maturity, impenetrable and so forth. They're wrapped or shrouded in the culture, and now they're firmly grounded in the culture and so forth. They're mummified or preserved or crystallized in the culture when they get to that point. This is why we've had that in the culture. The whites and their offspring are just beginning to catch up with that. So through the study of neuroscience, they're starting to see the connections between the skeletal system, the connections between that and the paring down the synapses in the brain. And now, instead of saying, well, people become adults at 18 or they become adults at 21, and that is what it is. They even have neuroscientists giving presentations to legislators, giving presentations to attorneys general, giving presentations to law enforcement officials and so forth, because they're beginning to change laws based on neuroscience with regard to penalties, because they notice the difference that because the brain is not fully developed until you're around 28, the kind of decisions that someone makes at 21 and 22, they still don't understand consciously the ramifications of the decisions and the weight of decisions, the gravity of the decisions they're making, the self-destructive decisions they're making at 20, 21, 22. Yes, they can memorize and understand, well, if you do this, then this will happen. You may get in trouble and so forth. But that's just memorizing information or memorizing what you've been told, what you've heard. But understanding fully the ramifications ahead of time based on what you're engaged in at the moment. The brain isn't fully developed yet, so foolish decisions are going to be made at 20, 21, 22, and so forth, that the person who's 28, whose synapses have fully pruned or pared down and they're more focused, they make better decisions. So they're changing sentencing requirements based on neuroscience. They're just catching up with what our people already knew. But that's directly related to our subject, because when someone is talking about a young woman being 18 is fully grown, or 19 or 20 being fully grown, and they're 40, and they're trying to screw a 20-year-old and saying, well, they're grown, so it's okay. They haven't even entered into the threshold of adulthood yet. And we know, even if you don't know anything about neuroscience, if you don't know anything about ancestral culture or the deities that govern the skeletal system as well as the brain and so forth, and why there's not equilibrium or balance in that kind of situation, if you don't know that intellectually, we've always known that instinctively. And if someone is seen trying to pursue a young woman, the males in the family will beat that Negro down or even kill that Negro for coming after their young sister or coming after their daughter or whatever, because they know that even the energetic output of the nervous system of an older person is different than the energetic output of the nervous system, the central nervous system of a younger person that's still not fully developed, just instinctively. So we know what's going on. These Negroes know what's going on, but they're seeking to control. They're seeking to press themselves or force themselves on younger women and trying to rationalize that activity. Some of them will try to say, well, in Africa, our people were, once they turn 14, they having sex. When you look at the menstrual cycles of young women, when they onset of menarche and so forth, in young women on the continent, there are studies been done, for example, in Ghana, the ones in the more quote-unquote industrialized areas, the more urbanized areas, the onset of menarche is much earlier, 12, 13, 14 years old. When you have the ones who are living in the rural areas in a more traditional fashion, the average age is between 15 and 16. Some, the onset won't even be 17 years old. So when they talk about going through rites of passage at that point, and then once they're finished with rites of passage or womanhood training, they're ready to be married, they're not talking about 12 and 13-year-olds. They're talking about people traditionally around 16 to 17 years old when they come out of that, and the people that they are marrying or connecting with, having their new boyfriend who would eventually become their husband and so forth, is someone who just went through his rites of passage, and he's around the same age as them, 16, 17, 18 years old. That's no different in reality than two high school seniors here in North America getting together as quote-unquote boyfriend and girlfriend, and then years later they get married. But they may get married earlier on the continent, but there's still a balance. There's still a Hetep and Hetepet. There's still an equilibrium. They're not talking about once someone turns 16 and the onset of menarche has manifested, they go through their womanhood training and so forth. They're 16 years old or 17 years old, and then the 50-year-old man comes and say, well, they're grown, they're a woman now, so let me come and have sex with them. You have some people who become predators on the continent, just like some of our people have become predators here, influenced by the whites and their offspring. There's an influence of Islam, for example, over 1,000 years in West Africa, and some of our people got into that and some of our people did not. You have an influence of Christianity for a few hundred years in certain areas in West Africa and Central, some for just about 100 years, some for a couple of hundred years. White culture promoting this idea that females are inferior, you should use them as objects of stimulation and sexual activity and so forth. Some of our people allowed themselves by that and took advantage of that corruption and have moved to push that corruption and woven it into the fabric of quote-unquote traditional culture, but it's really not traditional culture. We just showed you what traditional culture is, and you know instinctively what traditional culture is. You know if you're a 40-year-old and you're trying to seek to go after some 19 or 20-year-old, you're a criminal, you're a sexual predator and need to be dealt with as a sexual predator and an enemy in the community. No debate. And you know you're trying to get away with something. And you know the people frown on it because we know still instinctively that that's predatory behavior because they're not fully developed mentally. You know somebody 19, 20, 21 is not mature, and someone who's 28, 29, 30, 35, 40, and so forth, you know that instinctively. We know that neurologically. We know that even physiologically with regard to bone density, and the bone density is directly related to brain development. So we know that physiologically, we know that neurologically, but we know that instinctively and culturally. So these are criminals in the culture. And, of course, they have precedents that's been established, and they look for those precedents as excuses to continue. But we don't operate based on those criminal-type precedents. You look at Christian ministers, you have the Negro black ministers who are rapists, criminals, perverts, and so forth, just as they are imitating their white Christian pastors and priests in the Catholic Church, and they're all faggots and molesting children. But that's the nature of the whites and their offspring, so of course they're going to do that. That's who they are. They've been doing that for thousands of years, and they're going to continue because that's who they are. We get involved in Christianity. We're manufacturing excuses for following this foolish doctrine, women become inferiorized and so forth, reading the Old Testament and reading the Bible and so forth in the New Testament and making excuses for old men to go after younger women and so forth and all these different things, and looking at these ridiculous texts, these Negroes have that precedent. So you see people like Eddie Long and these other criminal idiots engaged in sexual deviance in the quote-unquote Christian community or black Christian community, because they're following the same precedent established by the whites and their offspring and rationalizing it. That's because deep down inside they were predators and criminals from the gate. You have the same thing in the idiots who call themselves foolishly Hebrews, idiots who call themselves Muslims, idiots who call themselves Nuwabians and Hermeticists and not involved in Gnosticism or pseudo-esotericism and so forth. You have a precedent that's established. You look at Malachi York, he's a bisexual, homosexual, rapist, pedophile, a clown, a pervert, a criminal, and admitted to these things, of course. People still follow him because they are down with that same perverse behavior. They know that he's guilty. That's why they still follow him. So you have these strident supporters of this bisexual, homosexual, rapist, pedophile. That's because they're down with that kind of behavior, and they have no problem with it. So they support him in that behavior. On the surface, they'll pretend like he was not guilty when they're talking to people who are not involved in that because they don't want to be attacked. But they all know that he's guilty. That's why they support him. That's why they follow him. They continue to follow him. That's why they fight for him, because they are down with the same behavior. They don't see a problem with it at all, part of their foolish, ridiculous doctrine. That's a precedent that's been established because our people are following the whites and their offspring and grafting that onto the black community. It's no different than in the Nation of Islam. Elijah Muhammad was a sexual predator. If you saw a 60-something-year-old old little man with his pants down by his ankles, bending over your daughter, screwing your daughter, you wouldn't say, oh, it's okay, that's the messenger. You would kill him. You wouldn't let that slide. You would kill him. He was a sexual predator impregnating teenage girls, an old-ass man impregnating teenage girls. The Negroes use that as a precedent and call him a great man and so forth, and they want to look beyond that because they're just as predatory in their mindset as he is. That's one of the reasons they get involved in these kind of organizations. These organizations, like the Nation and Nuwabians and Christian organizations, are full of predators. They're full of predators because that kind of behavior slides. They're telling people, well, God says the man should be in charge and the woman needs to obey the man and so forth. When they get those kinds of doctrines and they learn about that, that suits them perfectly. Negroes who are foolishly calling themselves Moors, which is idiotic, and of course we published our book, Moor Means Dead, which destroys their entire doctrine, and it is irrefutable, and nobody can say anything or do anything that would change the reality of anything published in the book, because not one syllable of it can be refuted, period. These fools following Timothy Drew, a so-called Noble Drew Ali, he was a sexual predator as well, in his 40s, marrying, quote-unquote, a teenager who was like 14 or 15 years old and so forth. If you saw a 45-year-old man today trying to marry your 14-year-old or 15-year-old daughter, you would kill the individual. You wouldn't be saying, oh, well, that's the prophet. It's okay. You'll be slicing his throat. Some Negroes will try to use the excuse, well, you know, back in the day, this is what we did, and we got married early, and this is what happened, 100 years ago or 70 years ago with our grandparents. Our people were also enslaved back in the day. Our people were also engaged in criminality, various forms back in the day. Just because we engaged in something, some of our people, which most of our people did not, that doesn't mean that it was part of our culture. We're telling you what what our culture is. There's a foundation, a cosmological foundation of our culture, and it's based on the god Hetep, the goddess Hetepet, equilibrium, balance, and so forth, guided by the Ka and the Kaet. If there's no balance with regard to the maturity of the individuals, and that means physiological maturity as well as consciousness. There's no such thing as, well, the person is 19, but they're just as mature as a 40-year-old, so they can go. That's insane. That's perverse. That's making an excuse, because physiologically they don't have the bone density or the infrastructure to operate in a mature fashion. They don't have neurologically they do not have that apparatus, and they haven't developed spiritually yet. because they haven't had those experiences in this body yet, in this lifetime yet, to manifest that kind of maturity. Someone repeating some intelligent phrases or studying and memorizing some doctrines and so forth, or repeating what they think is intelligent and mature. A child can repeat things that are mature. That doesn't mean the child's mature. A parrot can repeat the words of a human being. That doesn't mean the parrot knows exactly what the human being is talking about. You can tell the parrot to say computer, and they'll say computer. That doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. A young person repeating doctrines or things that they've learned or heard about or read about, and they're 19 and 20, they can repeat those things all day long. Your brain can repeat things. That doesn't mean you're mature. You haven't matured physiologically. You haven't matured spiritually. You haven't been able to align your Ka, your spirit, with your Ka on a consistent basis through specific life cycles that impact your body, revolutions of the Earth Mother that impact your growth and development. And these Negroes know instinctively what's going on. So we put this information out talking about the god Hetep, the goddess Hetepet. We talked about them in relationship to consciousness in parts 1, 2, and 3. But when we talk about moving into the field of Hetep, moving to that divine field of peace, balance, and equilibrium, and talking about plowing there, reaping there, eating there, drinking there, contending there, because you have the power to contend and reject disordered thoughts, intentions, and actions, and maintain your emotional balance. And then once you can do that, then you can, quote unquote, make love there in the Sekhet Hetep. That means you have to be in balance, equilibrium-wise, spiritually. Then you need to be in the field of Hetep. You need to be in an arena or in a relationship where there's equilibrium or balance, not imbalance. Not some older person trying to go after a younger person. Not some interracialism, and not some other kind of sexually deviant practice, another manifestation of sexual deviance and so forth. So we make a clear distinction between these criminal clowns, perverts, who are really our enemies in the community and deserve to be executed, whether they're executed by our own people or thrown to the dogs, thrown to the wolves, allowed to be executed and cut down by the enemy, because they are the enemy. They are no longer part of us. So we make a clear distinction between ourselves, who are truly conscious or Ka Skai, and these predators. That's what we wanted to deal with tonight. So you can look in our book, the OKRA Complex, the Soul of Akanfo. You can get that information there. As far as the nature of the soul, divine consciousness, the Ka and Kayat in detail, the entire book is focused specifically on the Ka, the Kayat, the OKRA, the soul, the divine consciousness. You can listen to parts 1, 2, and 3 of Ka Skai, the etymology and cosmology of consciousness, and the nature of the god Hetep, and the nature of the goddess Hetepet, and so forth, and the divine fields of peace, and so forth, and we go through that information in detail. So we're going to end the broadcast here. We just want to say Yerase. We thank you for tuning in to the broadcast, and Yebeshabio, we will meet again. Hetep.